celebrates a city that is layered at its history and as vibrant as its people. Hyderabad is not just a place on the map, it is a mood, a melody, a mingling of cultures. From its royal past to its tech-driven present, from old city lands to global corridors, it carries centuries within its heartbeat. To explore this fascinating mosaic, we have with us Pawan Kumar, who will lead today's conversation. Known for his keen observations and deep engagement with urban narratives, he brings a thoughtful lens to the stories of cities and their communities. In conversation with him is Danish Majid, whose writing captures the pulse of Hyderabad, its humor, its contradictions, its quiet resilience, and its evolving identity. Please join me in warmly welcoming Pawan Kumar and Danish Majid to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now take the privilege of introducing the panelist and the moderator of the session. First, we have Pawan Kumar, who is an officer of the 1992 Indian Forest Service batch, who had completed post-graduation in life sciences from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 1991. He is also a postgraduate in forestry from Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education, Dehradun. He completed PG Diploma in Environmental Law from National Law School, Bangalore. He has recently submitted his doctoral thesis in Environmental Geomatics to JNTU, Hyderabad. His interest spans art, culture, and music, particularly Western classical music. At present, he is serving as a special secretary in the Information Technology Department of the Government of Assam. May I now take the privilege of introducing our panelist of the session, Danish Majid, who is a Hyderabad-based writer who concentrates on South Asian culture, security, and Urdu literature. He has worked for Siyasat.com, the online English edition of the prominent Urdu daily. His writing has been featured in numerous South Asian media outlets such as Mint Launch, The Hindu Business Line, Express Tribune, The New Indian Express, The Wire, The News Minute, The Print, Madras Courier, Daily O, The Nation, Pakistan, and Dhaka Tribune. He is an alumnus of Franklin and Marshall College, Pennsylvania, and the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. The Hyderabadis from 1947 to the present day is his first book. Ladies and gentlemen, in a quest for exploring questions like, what defines a Hyderabadi identity today? How do history and modernity coexist in everyday life? How do language, food, and memory shape belonging? And what makes the people of Hyderabad truly beautiful? With these thoughts, I now hand over the session to Pawan to begin this engaging conversation. But I'd like to also inform you that to document the key takeaways of this session, we have two reporters named Anushmita Goswami and Pranjal Sekia, both from the Department of Political Science, who are students of 4th semester. Thank you so much. Over to you, Pawan.
Good afternoon, friends. I think everyone had a sumptuous lunch and you are in quite relaxed mood now. So to put the entire discussion in a perspective, first I would request Danish to, his book actually, The Hyderabadis, which is critically acclaimed and won accolades, it covers a period from 1948 to 2014. So why 1948 and why 2014? Can you explain it to our audience?
Thank you, Pavan. Uh, as we know, whenever we study Indian history or overall South Asian history, the landmark year is 1948, 1947. But nothing, history didn't just circle around that year, especially when the British were leaving and they divided the country into two. A.G. Nurani, for those of you who've read the book The Destruction of Hyderabad, he calls police action, which happened in 1948. And this police action refers to the accession, the process by which this princely state of Nizam ruled Hyderabad acceded to India. So he refers to police action as the third act of a tragedy that had engulfed the subcontinent during the independence. The first act he refers to is the riots that happened in Punjab, Bengal, North India. The second tragedy is, the second act of the tragedy is the Kashmir War, which was fought between India and Pakistan. So this third act has gone very unnoticed, that it's partially due to, a lot of indigenous reasons, which we were just talking about among Hyderabadis as well. But this episode clearly has had, in 1948, it's had a lot of reverberations on what transpired after within South Central India. Because once the state had acceded, a lot of the indigenous Hindu Telugu speaking population, the Telangana population, they were happy that they were away from a lot of them were happy that they were away from princely rule. Just like a lot of Kashmiris were happy that the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir no longer hovered over them. But then they were also disenchanted because another population which spoke the same language as them from the neighboring state of Madras Presidency came in, and this Telangana population, this Telangana Telugu population felt that this Madras Presidency invasion was costing them their jobs. And that is why they asked for another state in 1969, the Telangana struggle. And then in 2014, the state was made. India finally got one of its youngest states, Telangana. However, within this new Telangana, 1948 is very much a theme in political campaigns as well too. So that's why I chose, from 1948 to the present day, because history, one episode just doesn't stop all the time. It reverberates in the future.
There were about 500 princely states in India, and Hyderabad was one of them. And Nizam actually wanted to accede to Pakistan.
No, I would say he wanted to remain independent.
Yeah, that's the standard narrative that he didn't want to join India.
No, he didn't want to join India. No, but he wanted to remain independent.
And when that happened, that kind of conflict, somehow some of the followers of Nizam, they formed an army which was part of MIM, Majlis Ittihadul Muslimin. They called themselves Rajakars, and then they went around with a lot of violence, killing people and raping women and all that. This is the narrative that is handed down in all the books, history books. We read this, and we have films like Nagarjuna's Rajanna and recent movie called Rajakar, where that side of the story is sort of enlarged, but there is another side to the coin. Danish wrote, recorded in his book, that almost 25,000 Muslims also in Hyderabad were sometimes in cold blood shot. And there was a report after the entire violence ended, which had actually put this figure in lakhs. In several districts of the entire Marathwada and Greater Hyderabad region, the population was purged. So, what is this true? Is this narrative true? And what do you have to say about it?
So the report that you're referring to is the Pandit Sundarlal Committee report. And just to give further context, the princely state of Hyderabad encompassed what are today certain parts of Maharashtra, the Marathwada part, and Hyderabad, Karnataka, parts of which is it's still referred to as Hyderabad, Karnataka, northeast Karnataka. So this is where most of the massacres happened. Hyderabad city was safe. There was another leftist rebellion against the feudal forces of the Nizam, but that was separate. But these massacres which you speak of have these narratives been coming out, not just through my book, but a lot of Instagram historians, a lot of heritage activists have started bringing this out. So what you're saying is true, that a lot had transpired, but only now these narratives are coming out. And I'm hoping to see more books beyond mine talk about this and explore this aspect. But Hyderabadis, they can be they are inertia ridden, let's just put it that way. So they need to get these stories out quickly, because the amount of first-hand stories, oral histories, which ultimately provide a gateway to the past, especially in times where history is being rewritten. You mentioned certain movies which look to present a very one-sided view of what happened. So these narratives through books need to come out a little more, and even motion pictures. But I'm glad that Instagram, social media activists, heritage activists are doing their bit to bring these out.
So when Operation Polo, it was called police action. It was never called military action, even though it's camouflaged military action. At that point of time, the terrain was actually the political rule was Nizam's, and then there were number of small feudal lords who were loyal to Nizam, and then there was the bourgeois class who were working for these feudal lords, and then there was a labor class, working class. Even the medium of instruction was Urdu. It was never Telugu. And I remember in my childhood, in late 70s, when we used to go to Hyderabad for an occasional wedding from Andhra. Roots are from Andhra, but I settled in Hyderabad much later. So we used to get hold of an uncle who would speak in Urdu. And because all the auto drivers and the cab drivers, they were all speaking only Urdu. Population at the time, I read in one newspaper that 52% was Urdu speaking, and then 48% at that point of time, in late 70s, was Telugu speaking. So even then it was Urdu, and we never used to get idli dosas in Hyderabad. It was always Irani chai and bun maska. So one of the businessmen, shopkeepers, very passingly mentioned, my uncle was trying to know whether the shopkeeper knew Telugu. So the reply was, "Saab, ye Telugu wale to abhi aaye hain, the shopkeeper knew Telugu." So from that point in 1970s, then when N.T. Ramarao became the CM of the combined state in 1983 or so, later, huge migration from Andhra. Now the demography is completely changed. For example, we also moved into Hyderabad only in 2007. So how do you, and then Hyderabad itself had so many different kinds of the original Hyderabad. We were discussing about Yemeni Muslims, Chaush, who would stay in Barkas. They were Nizam's bodyguard, Republican Guard of Nizam. There were Shiites from Turkey and Iran, where Nizam's queens and all came. And there were Sunnis, the staff of Nizam. There were Sufis, like we have Mola Ali near our, close to where we live. And then they were, after partition came loans, the Sindhi Hindus from Pakistan who settled in Hyderabad. And we have people like us migrating from coastal Andhra. And the city's demography changed tremendously. The food habits also changed. The culture changed. Originally, Hyderabad was a city of midnight biryani. The culture of midnight biryani, eating biryani, mutton biryani after 12 o'clock midnight was the hallmark of Hyderabad, and they get a plate. There is also a joke when Nizam Usman Ali Khan died, somebody had to, he died in the early hours and somebody had to give a condolence message in All India Radio. So Jawaharlal Nehru spoke first and then somebody had to, one of his heir apparents had to do condolence message. Out of 3 or 4 sons, 2 of them refused. हमको ये छोटी मोटी बातों में मत जगाओ बोल के they were very dismissive. Don't wake us up, small matter. One son agreed to give a condolence message. So what to speak he was to be told. So there was a prompter from the side. All India's radio he was speaking. So entire condolence message, sentence by sentence, the prompter was telling, and he was reading out. Last में the prompter said, "और कुछ," and then the Nizam also said, "और कुछ." So the "और कुछ" thing, very royal, very laid back, and lazy in habit. That was the Hyderabadi culture. The highly commercial culture with software hubs, and can you believe there are about 30,000 Assamese in Hyderabad? As of now, there are 30,000 software engineers from Assam settled in Hyderabad. So demography is changing, and I don't know how it affected the traditional, original inhabitants, the denizens of Hyderabad. Do you have something to say?
I'm glad you brought the fact that a lot of Assamese are there. Even today, if you go to Hyderabad Central University, a lot of students from the northeast, and they love it there. And yes, the quote-unquote original inhabitants of Hyderabad, they saw their culture change, get diluted to a certain extent. But the thing is, even before 1948, Hyderabad has been a very cosmopolitan place. People from as far as, West Punjab, Sindh, North India, they came, they made Hyderabad their home. And because this population was very laid back, I mean, you need people to run the governments, okay? When the indigenous population is either oppressed or just laid back due to having it good, bahir wale hi aake kaam kar sakte. So Hyderabad, and that's still pretty much today as well. You were talking about the software industry, right? It's mostly people from outside. If anybody has ever been to Hyderabad, especially the universities, where you'll find a lot of people from Northeast, they'll also see that we're not really in Hyderabad, because HCU, Hyderabad Central University, and some of these universities in the tech park part of the city, it's not really quote-unquote Hyderabad, a lot of people say. You'll find the real Hyderabad maybe in the new city, which is it's still older than the high-tech software industry part of the city, and the old city, of course. So Hyderabad has been always a lot of a melting pot as well, despite having its own little distinct culture with, like I said, quote-unquote Hyderabadis, indigenous Hyderabadis feel is very central to them and them only. So I would say Hyderabad kind of, as somebody who's also an outsider myself, because I didn't grow up there, let's be honest, it has its own identity, but it's one that's multi-layered and is welcoming of others, because that's why you don't see this son of the soil versus outsider conflict in Telangana as you do in other states. I mean, the anti-Marwadi campaigns have happened recently, but those, I would say, are outliers, and they haven't reached the level of, Mumbai.
We have a place called Kachiguda in Hyderabad. Kachiguda is nothing but Kachi. They are Gujaratis from Kutch who have an entire area with them in Hyderabad. And these are not of recent origin. They have been there for 200-300
Centuries.
Centuries. Within again Hyderabadi Muslim population, it is not exactly homogeneous. There are several denominations and several ways of living. Can you throw a little light about that?
I mean, I'll give you a personal example. My great-grandfather from my dad's side, he's from Pondicherry. So from people from my mother's side, in just they say, "Arey tum to Madrasi hain." So even agar dekha jaye to Hyderabad, like Delhi, they say, it's the world's biggest refugee camp. Hyderabad in a certain way is like that, but I wouldn't call it a refugee camp. I would say it's a resort. It's been like a resort that people just came to, saw a lot of fun, chill, laid back people, but never wanted to go back as well. That's the way I see it. So Hyderabadi Muslims, I think those people who have been there from like 2-3 generations, they've become quote unquote indigenous as well. But I feel like it's, like I said, it's very cosmopolitan, and anybody who says, you know, go back to wherever you came from, they themselves are doing a disservice to the ethos of the city which they're from.
Many of us here would have tasted Hyderabadi biryani, the dish by which everyone knows Hyderabad. Nowadays, people from Assam also go to Asian Institute of Gastroenterology, which seems to be a very famous destination. And hospitals there, in Guwahati also, KIMS has a branch, Apollo has a branch.
Yep.
And at one point of time, there are about 6 flights between Guwahati. Every day had 6 flights to and fro from Guwahati to Hyderabad. So, regarding the food habits of Hyderabad, like can you throw some light? Paya and biryani to hai hi.
Biryani,
Nahar.
Nahari, yeah.
Nahari. And then you have the Halim competitions during Ramadan. I'm sure you must be missing all of that coming to Dibrugarh all the way during
Not really, to
Ramadan
be
period.
honest. No, I mean,
To our youngsters, you can tell what all can be eaten and enjoyed in Hyderabadi
so
food.
there's of course the biryani and the Ramzan Halim, which you mentioned, but Hyderabadis, I think we're also discussing this now. Hyderabadis have this thing like Hamara khana sabse acha hai, but even a lot of the food that one can consider Hyderabadi has foreign influences. You're talking about the Yemeni, the Chaushes, the Yemenis who came to serve in the Nizam's army. Marg is a dish. That's ultimately an Arab dish which we picked up from the Yemenis. But the biryani though, it's become highly commercialized there. Paradise, I'm sure people have heard the Paradise, right? I would say the best biryani is chicken biryani, but that's outside. For real authentic biryani, come to my house. I'd be glad to host anybody. I'd be glad to host anybody for that. Open invitation from to all of you. So, but there was a time, like you said, dosa idli was not common. It was mostly Irani chai or food habits, not just the actual food. Like my father tells me, and maybe some older folks who aren't even from Hyderabad who are here will attest to this. Bahar khana aib samjha jata tha. Having food outside the house was like, the elders would be like, no, like what will people say? It's wrong. But now the sushi places, the North Indian restaurant, not just the North Indian restaurants, but even the Mexican Thai food places that have emerged. Now eating out is a part of a Hyderabadi culture, brought in partly by the corporate tech parks. So food habits also evolved, but if you go to certain parts like the old city or Hyderabadi gharanas, you'll definitely find that old cuisine. But I've had it too much, and I think Hyderabadis are a little too xenophobic when it comes to having food from the outside. The older ones, especially. By outside, I don't mean restaurant, but different cuisines as well. Like putting aloo in biryani. In Assam, what's the biryani like in Assam? Aloo dalte kya hai yahan pe? See, Hyderabadis will not like that. That's how, limited they are with respect to their worldview with respect to biryani. So, if maybe before I leave, I want to try that Assamese biryani.
So probably you can take him to a restaurant in Dibrugarh, let him have Assamese biryani.
सिर्फ ऐसे ही open invitation नहीं दिया था मैं. There was a reason behind that.
Jamia Millia Osmania.
Jamia Osmania.
Jamia Osmania. Very popular among African students. A large population of African students, even in the area where I live in Secunderabad, Sanikpuri extension areas. African students come and stay, and there are conflicts between locals and African students also because of cultural differences, of food or whatever. But it has been a very popular place. Why is that? Why that popularity of Jamia Osmania among African students?
I'm glad that you were referring to Osmania University by its Urdu name, so I'm very happy that you mentioned that, just on a side note. But a lot of these Africans that come, Sudanese specifically, aसल में ये लोग they're expatriates of the Gulf. So a lot of them live in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and despite them being Arabs, they can't really, there was a time where they couldn't really attend those universities. Ab slowly badal raha hai with Saudi Arabia opening up a little more. But because most of these people are expatriates, Gulf expatriates, क्योंकि they can't go back to their home countries, some of them are conflict ridden, but at the same time being expatriates, they can't attend the local indigenous universities of UAE, Saudi Arabia. So that's why India ko aate hai log. And क्योंकि Hyderabad में क्या है मालूम, and some of these are not just Sudanese but Yemenis as well too, Yemeni students, because they know Hyderabad has a Yemeni history. They have these enclaves like Barkas we were talking about. So that's why a lot of these kids go to Osmania. And I think the fact that these kids are African is just another sign of Hyderabad's acceptance. Granted, I forgot to mention in my previous answer, this outsider, insider, ye hamesha se hua, even during the Qutub Shahi times, the Afaqis from Central Asia, the Islamic world, and then the Deccanis. So, wo hamesha rahenga. But I think Hyderabad has just still managed to, not take it too seriously when it comes to its this so-called own identity and say, son of soil, and say, nahi, bahar jao. So whether it's from Assam to Africa, Hyderabad is just quite the destination for students.
About Hyderabadi humor. So this happened to me in person. So I was going in a narrow lane in the car. A vehicle with 3 people riding it, a 2-wheeler, was coming from the opposite direction. So that gentleman comes, stops right in front of the car and then says, "Sadak hamara hai, hamara baap ka hai." Then I got irritated and said, "Hamara bhi baap ka hai." So that fellow says, "To jaake bech dal." This is typical humor of Hyderabad. If you see the Hyderabad Express, there are private videos circulating in Hyderabad with humor content. Hyderabad Express is a series done by Salim Fenku. There is a comedian called Salim Fenku. So can you throw some light about that? Because this is something our students will enjoy.
So, since you mentioned, तो आप दक्कनी में बात करें, and that Dakkani swagger, I can definitely imagine that auto wala saying that. Because as it is, Hyderabad's a very feudal place. We were just talking about how these princely states were feudal, right? Abhi wo Nawabi culture gaya nahi. And one kayast, so a lot of these kayast, these North Indians with names like Mathur, Saxena, they also were invited by the Nizam. And it's very self-deprecating, the humor. They don't take themselves seriously. They don't take, a lot of things that should be taken seriously, as with the attention that it deserves. For instance, one Kayas lady, she's like my grandmother. In my book, in chapter 9, I mention her. So, typical Hyderabadi lady. Kayas, they're a community which also is known to have certain proclivities towards alcohol as well. She openly told me, "Likhna padna jaisa vaisa, daru nahi piya so Kayas kaisa." So alcohol is big among Kayas, and I said it in a very Dakkani cadence. You saw the way I said it. So Hyderabad has been a bastion for this kind of humor, Dakkani humor. Because lehje mein, because of the Telugu, Kannada, Marathi influence, our Urdu is not what you'd find a Lucknow or Delhi wala saying. Lucknow ya Delhi wala will say, "Ye kya hai? Ye kya Urdu hai?" There's one other joke. A Lucknow wala comes to Old City in Charminar. He asks people, "Kya ye rasta Charminar jata hai?" So one person says, "How?" Has people, I'm sure, have heard that Hyderabadi say how. So then he's like, what is this how? Haan boliye ya na boliye, or even the more respectful ji. And then he goes to another person. He says, kya ye rasta char mina jata hai? And then that Hyderabadi, in that typical swagger which you just narrated your story, he says how. But then he goes to another person who's wearing a tie and a shirt. He says, chalo ye banda zara thoda level-headed dikh raha hai. He seems polished and sophisticated. I'll ask him. He asks him, he says, kya ye rasta char mina jata hai? That sophisticated looking person says, ji haan, ye rasta char mina jata hai. Then he says, thank God, finally a real answer. Ek jawab mila. So then he asks him, ye log how kyun bolte hain yahan pe? And then that person whom he thought was sophisticated, he says, nahi ye jo how jo hai, ye jahil loga bolte, padhe likhe loga nahi bolte. And then that guy asks him, kya aap padhe likhe hain? The response is, how? So Hyderabadis, the humor, it's not just, within these chote jokes. We've had a rich tradition of Dakkani humor, which really caught steam post-police action, because that was a tragic period for Hyderabadis. Just like we see a lot of, partition literature. You have the best literature coming out of, Bengal, Punjab, helping people recover from the tragedy or shedding light on the tragedy. For us, it was Dakkani humor which helped us get over that tragedy. One historian told me, रोने के लिए आंसू नहीं थे हमारे पास, ये Dakkani मज़ाहिया शायर हमको हंसना सिखाए. So it's a humor capital of the country, you could say, Hyderabad.
Another feature of the greater Hyderabadi culture is music. I've been seeing the videos that you post on Facebook, Qawwalis, many Qawwalis. And then we have Western classical, with the Anglo-Indian community came lot of Western classical music to Hyderabad. We have people like John Martand, Naveen Ilia, who was my teacher at some point of time. And there are several Anglo-Indian of Hyderabad. People of Russian, Ukrainian, British, Australian origin settled in Hyderabad. Diana Hayden, for example. They are into music. Their subculture is again little different. Can you throw some light about it?
Yeah, this is, we don't have to go talk about this in recent times as well. Quli Qutub Shah ke time mein, Telugu musicians and poets were brought in and patronized as well. It wasn't just diamonds from the neighboring Andhra Telugu speaking areas that were brought into Hyderabad in Golconda and carved and sent out to the world. A lot of Telugu musicians, poets, they were very much patronized. And Quli Qutub Shah, he loved the language of Telugu. Ye jo Dakkani zaban bhi hai hamari, Nakko jo hai, it's a very Marathi. For those of you who might be familiar with Marathi culture, Nakko is a Marathi word. And
Nakko, do you understand?
meaning no.
If you see Mahmood's comedy movies, they will not say nahi, they will say nakko, nakko. Don't.
So, and even HPS, a lot of जो हैदराबाद पब्लिक स्कूल है, जागीरदार कॉलेज जिसको वो ज़माने में कहा जाता था, a lot of music teachers and musicians from the West were brought in. And one person's book, Zeenat Khan's book, The Sirens of September, this elaborates on it. She did some good work on this. तो और आप जो खवाली का बोल रहे थे ना, बहुत सारे घराने हैदराबाद में भी घराने हैं खवाली के घराने. It's not just Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's Jalandhar Gharana, which then went to Pakistan. Ek Dabirpura mein there's a dargah, and the Banda Nawaz Khawal, they have their own little gharana, and the Warsi brothers are there. So it's not just North Indian Hawalis. Even people, we were talking about Quli Qutub Shah, Piya Baj Pyala Piya Jayena. That's a very well-known ghazal in South India and in certain circles of North India as well. So very rich tradition, and a lot of this tradition was consolidated and grown during the 6th Nizam's time, Mehboob Ali Pasha. He invited poets from Delhi, Rampur, to give more fillip to this arts and culture scene.
Many of us hear this term, Tis Mar Khan. So I didn't know the meaning. When I went to Falaknuma, the guide there told that Mir Usman Ali Khan killed 30 tigers in a hunt in 1 hour or 2 hours, something like that. So he was given 30 smar, 30 tigers he killed. So can you tell something about the palaces of Hyderabad? Chowmahalla, Falaknuma,
I'm glad you asked this
Bella
question.
Vista.
हाँ the palaces जो है ना फलकनुमा का there's a history and this just goes to show how quirky royal people and just उन लोगों के क्या personality के quirks रहते and it's because they're just used to being royal, getting what they want. So the Falaknuma palace which you just mentioned, really that didn't always belong to the Nizam. It belonged to a noble named Asmaja. No, Vikhar al-Umra, sorry, Vikhar al-Umra. It belonged to Vikhar al-Umra, one of the highest ranking nobles. And then the sixth Nizam, Mehboob Ali Pasha, who we talked about, he was invited by the Vikhar al-Umra. और अब निज़ाम साहब आ रहे तो खातिरदारी करना पड़ता. So, but for 2-3 months, he didn't leave the palace, the Nizam. I mean, how does anybody know how to kick out a guest of their house? I mean, here, it's quite the, zara thodi shikast hoti, you're just wondering, अरे कैसा निकालना? But when this guest is the ruler, अब कैसा निकालना हमको? But Vikhar al-Umra got the hint that he really liked the house, especially when the sixth Nizam was praising it. He then gave him the house. But Rakam ada bhi kare, Nizam Sahab. He gave him money for that. So that's one story about a palace. And Chowmahalla jo hai, aaj bhi, it's a big tourist attraction in Old City. Even these so-called titular Nizams, they have their Takht-Nashini ceremonies. They're there. Takht-Nashini meaning when you're the crowning ceremony. They're there. So these palaces, while I think they're beautiful, I just think there's more to Hyderabad than the palaces as well too. So, and I know I can't afford a room in Taj Falaknuma, but if any of you end up going to Falaknuma and getting a room, please invite me for a dinner there, okay? I myself cannot afford a room there. But first the Assamese biryani.
So, when we read the history in your book, you mentioned about communism in among aristocrats of Hyderabad. Makhdoom Muhyiddin,
Yes.
being a poet and more of a Ghalib of South India.
You know it, yeah. You know it.
So he was a communist, and then there was another streak that continued up to 1970s.
Yes.
Again, Jamia Osmania, George Reddy types.
Oh, yeah.
There were killings on the campus. Where did this, the larger context also, Telangana and Marathwada saw a resurgence in extreme left militancy. How did this come about? Like, how come it's into royals? How come it's into campuses?
Yeah, I mean, one wouldn't think that somebody born into privilege like aristocracy would take to revolutionary tendencies. But that's just been weird. Good, bad, we can discuss some other time. But leftism and the rich have had a very symbiotic and also very contradictory relationship. And not just in Hyderabad, but pure Hindustan, you had Sajjad Zahir, who was the scion of a aristocratic family of Lucknow. A lot of these kids, these people were being sent to these aristocrats. They used to be sent to England for higher studies. That was a mark of being from a very well-off family. So some of these people, they went to institutions like the London School of Economics and SOAS, but SOAS that time was not leftist. It was more of a imperial institution. But London School of Economics, Oxford, J.P. Narayan, even he went to Wisconsin. But let's concentrate more on Europe. So leftism, in the 20s and 30s, when these kids were going to study at these universities, right? Not too far away in Russia, the October Revolution had happened. Just not even 1-2 decades ago. So those revolutionary thoughts were very much being espoused by leftist academics like Harold Lasky in LSE. So a lot of these kids from Hyderabad and all over India went, and they were exposed to those ideals. And that's why they then brought those ideals back as professors to universities in Hyderabad and all over British India. And that is how these kids from these well-off families in these universities like Osmania, they were exposed to these ideals. And then they then took to these ideals and then even took part in the armed struggle against the Nizam as well. So, however, in these districts where they were helping out with that leftist struggle, once the Indian army marched troops in, a lot of these kids from these aristocratic families, Raj Bahadur Gaur, who you can read about in my book, they were at first saying, let's keep the struggle against the Indian army alive. Because as it is, they've entered the Nizam's territory, they've supplanted the monarch who we don't like, but now the new enemy is the Indian government. So at first they said, let's keep the armed struggle alive. One contingency said, let's keep the armed struggle alive. The other said, no, let's carry out the cause within the ambit of the Indian constitution. And Nehru encouraged that. He wanted an opposition. So that's how this leftism came about in Hyderabad and all over India. But you're talking about the 70s. After the Telangana, the first struggle for statehood in Telangana, Osmania University was a major center of this. So now with the struggle gone, with the struggle called off by Marichanna Reddy, because the first struggle for statehood, the guy who was spearheading it, he basically cut a deal with Indira Gandhi to call off the struggle. So a lot of these students in Osmania University, which was a hotbed of this Telangana statehood movement, to keep themselves politically active, there was the extreme left and there was the extreme right. So, and George Reddy was a part of the extreme left there.
One strange phenomena. Kevin Shepard, in his book, he wrote about, researched a lot about independent Sufis of India. Means the Sufi saints who don't adhere to Saharwadi, Suharwadi, Chishti, Naqshbandi, none of those traditions. They are independent of all that. There seems to be a prevalence of these saints in Hyderabad and greater Hyderabad, that is Marathwada, northern Karnataka also. You can see the phenomenon in even Shirdi Sai Baba. He was supposed to be an independent. Kevin Shepard calls him as an independent Sufi. There are several such people. Why do you think that phenomena was, this was not there in the north, not much there in the north. Why did it happen in Hyderabad?
I will have to admit that this is somewhat out of my expertise, but I think one person who can definitely, whose works one can check out, Scott Kugel. Okay, he talks about, he's even a Sufi. He teaches at Emory University. He considers himself a Sufi of the Kalimi lineage. So when you said outside of those, Suravardi, Chishti, so, and his murid is not just in, his peer is not only in Hyderabad, but in Marathwada. So he converted to Siraj Kugel because of this. So I don't know too much about this, but I'm glad that you brought it up because I think Scott Kugel's work needs to be consulted even more for this, and it's fascinating. But we do have, dargahs like Shah Khamosh. And if anybody, Farid Ayaz bolke khawal hai, jiski Coke Studio Pakistan pe, he's originally from Hyderabad, और उनकी दरगाह जो है शाह खामोश भी है, and Shah Khamosh came from Malerkotla. So that's maybe something independent of the, usual other silsilas. But Dar es Salaam pe, on this road where the MIM headquarters are, you'll find a lot of these shrines.
General landscape of Hyderabad, if you see the original rocky landscape is being leveled, and there are citizens who are deeply concerned about it. Even the heritage structures. Yes. You take, for example, Ma Sahiba tank. Yeah. There is no tank there now. And nobody knows who was Ma Sahiba. Saidanima tomb, and many other structures. They are, everybody says Eramanjil. Who was Iram? No one knows. So, what do we have to do to keep that awareness on?
Abhi, there are also, heritage activists, like Rocks ka ek group hai. I believe most of them are from, yeah, Save the Rocks, there you go. Some Hyderabadis have been helping, thanks for the help. So Save the Rocks, they are doing that because back then my uncle whenever I used to be a little naughty, he used to say, Banjara Hills mein ye bahut rocks rehte the. He used to say, I'm gonna make you sit on the hot rocks of Banjara Hills. That's what he used to say to scare me. But that's what's happening in Osmania General Hospital. That was also in danger of being torn down. As it might not be in the best situation today, however, but these heritage structures, I mean, the previous governments, they did some restoration of the bachelor's quarters building, the Mausam Jahi markets, but I don't know how much of a good stewards these governments are of Telangana's history. Because instead of, restoring old, royal structures is not only heritage, it's the rocks. And so, I mean, but that's what happens when modernization, urbanization happens. The old quaint heritage is always in danger of being lost. ये तो हर सिटी का सिलसिला है, यही मसला है.
What about the Musi river? We had a very beautiful river which was a major tributary of Krishna. And like our Bharalu and Vahini rivers of Guwahati, that also became few feet wide. Musi at many places is like a canal now. So what kind of role it did play and then how to revive it?
I mean, there have been, last I read was a displacement because of the anti-encroachment. To a certain extent I can understand that, but it is such a polluted river. The Musi is such a polluted river. I don't think even Hyderabad's residents have done the best job keeping it alive. UP में बोलते गंगा और जमुना, लेकिन हैदराबाद में ईसा और मूसा है. But I think the Musa has not exactly been given its due credit as a lifeline, which it should be and is. So, like I said, just poor stewardship of heritage and just callousness on behalf of citizens, which I think is not always the best combination.
I guess the same thing happened to cascading lakes of Hyderabad. There were 200 plus lakes, Ravirala and then Kapra. I live near Kapra Lake. So most of them are now dying down and then water table is going down. So I guess serious problems there. So I now leave the house for questions. There are very distinguished Hyderabadi is there sitting in the front row. And then, so if anyone has questions, kindly ask.
Thank you. So, good to see both of you on stage talking about one of our favorite cities. And I wanted to add, there was a lovely little book which was originally published in Telugu about 7 years ago, and an English translation was released at the start of this year. And interestingly, it's by very much a Telugu speaker, but he titles the book Shaharnama. And
Lokeshwar.
Lokeshwar. And he tells the story, like Danish tells the story of the city through some of its people, he tells the story of the city through some of its localities, and very nicely. It's not as elegantly written as Danish's, or the translation is not as elegant as Danish's language is, but it's a lovely little book, and it does give a perspective on the city through, which is from a very different perspective.
Ji.
So how could we best combine, your stories and Lokeshwar's stories?
Combine. Sure. So,
Sorry, if I can just add a little thing. One of the interesting things, and I can't remember the location where it happens. He's got a nice little potted history of the first idli dosha restaurant in Hyderabad. So I can't remember the location, but he's got a nice little it's got some nice little anecdotes about it.
So, I'll start off with Lokeshwar. I met Lokeshwar. He came to one of my talks at the Hyderabad Literary Fest. He gave me a copy of his book. So I need to get in touch with him. But combining them, I mean, do you mean like, like an anthology or something, or? I mean, yeah, I look forward to it. Interestingly enough, when looking for stories for this book, I did reach out to Lokeshwar. I'm like, can I speak to you? Perhaps you could be a subject. He's like, no, this is COVID time. I can't talk. So that's a little interesting tidbit. But now I would definitely love to work with, him. Mm-hmm. So I think if somebody gets us, an anthology where, they curate one of the stories of the family and one from his, one of the localities. There are many ways to tell the stories of a city. I mean, or even just, some partition books. There's Anchal Malhotra who did it to the objects. So there's just so many creative ways to tell these stories of cities or of bygone times. So if you have somebody in mind who can curate, let me know. And regarding that criticism, Surya Bulusu is a good kid who wrote the book. It was overall a positive view. And the same criticism was leveled upon me by a JNU professor at the IIC. If somebody's read the book and says that, I've relegated women characters to supporting roles, I'll take that criticism. I'm very much willing to have that discussion. Because Surya read the book, and that's why he said that. But that professor, she didn't exactly read the book. She just bought it. But whereas some other people say, no, you have Umar Farooq Khadri's mother in the second chapter. You have my grandmother. You have Odesh Rani Bawa, to whom I tell the story of her cousin Raj Bahadur Gaur and of present times. So that criticism, fine, it's a part of the game, but I would like, it would be a little more, how should I say this, it would be a little more streamlined, that criticism, if somebody read the book and leveled that upon me. But it's also a question of access as well too. I just have to get this, deadlines, and plus such a work has never been attempted, and these stories haven't been told due to the inertia of, Hyderabadis. So it's a start also.
Glad. Hi, this is Sudhir Gautam from Hyderabad.
Hi, Sudhir.
Glad, Danish and Pawanji. I'm glad that the stories of Hyderabad is traveling all the way to Northeast here.
Thanks for having us.
And Hyderabad is also known as City of Pearls, besides being the IT hub. So there's a story behind it. But now with progressing and modernization of Hyderabad, and now Secunderabad, Hyderabad, and now Cyberabad, now it has grown into a new municipal administration. So where does this City of Pearls stand? And whoever comes to Hyderabad, they ensure that they get that pearls necklace for the family members. So where does it stand now?
Excellent question.
Also,
so,
yeah.
So as I also somewhat mentioned, before Africa and France, the only source of diamonds was Golconda. I think late 1800s, and that was around when the alternative Jagan. Hyderabad. And yeah, I think they used to be imported. Tarashe jate the Hyderabad mein, and then they used to be exported. And that's it. And so even after these other centers outside of Hyderabad developed, a lot of, Marwadis and Gujaratis were called in by the Nizam to help develop these places, these pearls and stones. And a lot of these shops, if anybody's been to Hyderabad, Kishan Das, Totaram, if you go on their websites, you'll see that they take pride in the fact that these people were the prime sellers and providers of diamonds and necklaces to the royalty. And Marwadis had been coming to Hyderabad since the third Nizam's time, which was not too long after these other alternate sources of diamonds are discovered, but in other parts of the world. But despite these sources, other parts being discovered for sources for diamonds, still the industry was thriving in Hyderabad too. So that is why a lot of these Marwadis, Gujaratis, Jains came and developed that. And Ajbi, these shops which I mentioned, Totaram, what's it called, Bajrang Prashad. Some of these people, इनके shops अभी Old City के चार मीनार पे दिखेंगे आपको. As you go up to the चार मीनार, and I'll end this answer with this anecdote which I found, which a senior journalist told me. A lot of these Marwadis, they asked the Nizam, they went up to him, a delegation of them went up to the Nizam, they said, जब भी आपकी सवारी यहाँ पे आ रही चार मीनार से या चार मीनार तक, आपकी नज़र सोने पे पड़ना. Your eyes should have the sight of gold in front of them as you enter the city. He said, all right, fine. He gave them makeshift shops, and then those shops are still standing. And that is why a lot of people, Kishan Das is hugely popular. बहुत सारे शादियां जो होते हैं बड़े घरानों के हैदराबाद में, they get their jewelry from that. So it's still very well and alive. If not the sourcing and the diamond cutting, but some of the best jewelry, Jagdamba, Totaram, Kishan Das, they're still in Hyderabad. So that tag is still well deserved, the City of Pearls.
Good afternoon to all the Hyderabadis in the room.
Kaise Sudhakar garu?
So there are one or two observations and then a question that leads to that. Hyderabad is definitely changing the way you have asked the question. The rocks are being replaced by the hard rock cafes.
Yeah.
The glass and chrome is like a foreign country within the city. Large number of people come from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. Not just today, it's been there forever, for the last 400 years. But then what I found is that there are positives and negatives. One of the negatives, I said, rocks are going. Water level is depleting, which you mentioned. One of the heritage brands like Nilofer retained its position and built on it. It's a 100 crore plus brand. Just a chai brand which has built a lot of product strategy around itself. It continues to attract people from all parts of the country, including Assamese, as you mentioned. The other day I was going around Necklace Road. Chhat Puja was being conducted in an elaborate manner. And 60,000 people visited that place. 60,000 people are from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Haryana kind of places, and they've been there for the last 30 plus years. So such a thing is fine, but there are two important pointers which we have to focus on. One is the emerging brand of politics, because no state or no city can be discussed without the politics around it. So the emerging brand of politics is anti-Andhra politics. That is one. Anti-Andhra is the Andhra state of people who originate from Andhra, who settled in Hyderabad and Telangana. So anti-Andhra, that is one brand of politics.
Yep.
The second brand of politics is anti-religion. Actually, Hyderabad is known for the religious harmony and coexistence for ages. In spite of the fact that it was ruled by a Muslim ruler, or the erstwhile rulers have been Muslims largely, we did not have much of a strain on the social fabric in terms of religion. But if you go to Charminar and see some one corner of the Charminar, there is a small temple that has come, which was not there till 80s also.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
60s, if you see a photo of 1950s Charminar, wo nahi tha.
Yeah, Naitha. So that is the new brand of politics again, trying to ignite some kind of a possibility, because when you hate someone, there's a possibility for you to create a room there. So these are the two things coming up. How and why do you think Hyderabad will overcome this?
Wow. How will we overcome it? I mean, a lot of this is because, certain, factions of Old City, won't name them, but they're of both religions, let me just put it that way. ये 60s, 70s में शुरू हो गया था क्योंकि while it wasn't, as in your face as it's becoming right now, like these communal fissures शुरू हो गए थे 60s से क्योंकि the Congress government back then, their main opposition was the left. And it was a very popular opposition, especially in the districts and in certain parts of the city, certain Telangana districts and certain parts of Hyderabad. So to destroy that opposition, what they did was they created the Razakar faction, the parent organization whom you mentioned. They were basically revived. Because post 48, after the anti-accession rhetoric, the MIM chief Qasim Razi was sent to Pakistan, and he bequeathed the organization to Abdul Wahid Owaisi, Asaduddin Owaisi's grandfather. So slowly, they were being put into, they were being made to fight, contest municipal elections, state elections, and that was in order to dilute the influence of the leftists. But at the same time, they were also, the Bharatiya Jansangh was also coming up as well too. Tiger Narendra, that who I'm sure you've heard of. So, and I did an article back in August on, the anti-Marwadi agitation. That's also something that kind of caught steam as well. So, the Marwadis, the Hyderabadi Marwadis, who were very much a part of the fabric, and still are, who came to Hyderabad as soon as early as the third Nizam's times, they were patrons of, Tiger Narendra as well. So this polarization has always been there, but how are we going to get back from it? How are we going to overcome this considering the more recent times? I think, it just puts more of a onus on, oral historians, chroniclers like myself, and even more so on people who are heritage activists, social media, thought leaders, and historians to put out these narratives even more. I think that's how we can do it. Because we haven't put out these alternatives as yet. There is scope to do it, but like you said, things are taking a turn for the worse. So I think it's ultimately the duty of us chroniclers to do so.
There's an observation that I have. I just want you to reflect on that. And maybe there is literature out there which I am unaware of. Pre-independence, the city's evolution to a certain extent seems like competitive elitism. That is, you have in Secunderabad the ones who come from Chennai, Bangalore, so it's a resort place for them. And that's why you have a Secunderabad club, you will have a presidential palace, you will have a golf, fantastic one, and all of that. And then on the other side, the Nizam, the competitive elitism, you will have a polo ground, you will have a HPS, you will have a Osmania. Okay, it's largely a very strange evolution for a city for almost around 100 to 120 years. Which I am not aware of any other city which has evolved like this. 100% aristocratic, yes. Okay, so
yes.
reflect.
I mean, aristocracy, Nawabipan to khoon mein hai. That's always gonna stay. I don't know how that's gonna leave, but I mean, And HPS, like you said, वो तो हमेशा elitist institution था, जागीरदार college था, and then Secunderabad has always been, you know, a cantonment town, और बाहर के से लोग हमेशा आते थे. Even Nizam के time में, it was seen as a place where a lot of, you know, outsiders, Anglo वाले बहुत आते थे. So, and even there is this, you know, Mohan Guruswami, sir, I'm sure you've heard of. He says, you know, it's always been cosmopolitan. He calls himself a Sikandrabadi rather than a Hyderabadi. And the cities, it's amalgamation of many cities. I see high-tech city as a new Gurgaon. Old city, of course, Sikandrabad, and then new city, which I think is still, it's newer than old city, but not as new as high-tech city. But where all these, but I will say where all these converge. Tori Chowki, Khajaguda में थोड़ा converge होता है, क्योंकि it's still, Khajaguda is really close to Gachibowli, and a lot of people who've gotten money from old city, Gulf ka paisa leke, they've moved to Toli Chowki. So there is still a little convergence, I will say. But like you said, there is that elitism there, which, you know, institutions ke zariye they try to project.
It's not only elitism. See, there's an isolation. In Bangalore, you will find schools. Okay. In Secunderabad, you really don't find schools which are that old. Maybe a St. Francis. Okay, sorry, St. Anne's. But you really don't. Even on the British side.
British side.
Yeah. But then you will definitely find a horse riding ground. You will definitely find a, you know, what do you call, golf and, you know, bar, you know, those clubs and things like those.
I mean,
anyway.
in Secunderabad, it's funny that you mentioned that because in Jilani Banu's Ewan-e-Ghazal, an Urdu novel which I read, she said Secunderabad ke Nawab, I mean, sorry, old city ke Nawab, they used to go to Secunderabad to, you know, meet Anglo women and British. So, वो तो हमेशा से ही था.
Just to add one more point is that it is changing very fast. The identities are also changing now. From the old biryani kind of a identity for the city is now multiple identities in terms of tech, in terms of culture, in terms of sports, in terms of pharma. A lot of new businesses have spawned in, and then if you recently I was at the police commissioner's office. You know, they have put in the entrance a nice history of who was the first police commissioner of the city. 1850s se leke some name which I don't even remember. I have taken a picture. They still project it officially. He's our senior till the current latest commissioner, Mr. Sajanar. So it goes like that with pictures and the year, and the last one is Sajanar. So they hold it with pride. Nobody has actually discontinued that. While the old is still there, the new identities are rapidly changing. Many national institutes are there in and around Hyderabad. As many as 17 national institutes, education and non-education research combined. So the identity is also changing.
Definitely.
Thank you.
No, we would have loved to continue with this conversation, but we have another session lined up, so that's why we are running short of time. So we would love to have your concluding remarks, sir.
It's very enlightening for me also, and then to speak in front of a distinguished audience who are more familiar than me with Hyderabad. And Krishnan sir is here, and Mr. Sir, would you like to add a remark? And Mr. Sri Nair, and then ma'am. So thanks to you all, and we have a gentleman sitting very quietly, one of our generous donors, and who was heading Andhra Pradesh's SCMT, State E-Mission Team, Mr. Mukund Pujari. He's an Assamese, but he's familiar with South. He worked with Chandrababu Naidu's government. So thanks for coming here, and thanks to Barnali madam and reporters and all the youngsters who are sitting here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that lively and insightful exchange. It has actually reminded us that a city's essence lies not only in its architecture alone, but in the warmth of its people and the stories they carry. As we conclude, let us remember that cities evolve, skylines change, but what endures are the people, their laughter, their resilience, and their shared dreams. On behalf of the organizing team, I extend heartfelt thanks to Pawan Kumar and Danish Majid for this enriching conversation, and thank you to our wonderful audience for being part of this celebration of Hyderabad and its beautiful people. Thank you.